Poughkeepsie Lake. So I'm the oldest guy here.
Slightly older.
This has been a problem that we've had to deal with folks for a long time. And our doom as a result of the disappearance of jobs has been forecast. But there are 6 million jobs out there unfilled, thousands of which happen to be in Massachusetts, even Massachusetts, because we've got a lousy system of worker training and placement. I mean, did I say 6 out of 6 million? These are, we're calling them middle skill jobs. They require skills. They don't require a college degree, but they require training. They may lead to a college degree. Can't fill them. So what's gonna happen to all the truck drivers? Well, these middle skill jobs are natural for all these folks that drive a truck.
Well, you've got to be very careful with this, I agree with you, but I
Yeah.
think you have to be careful that when you do these vast labor exchanges, that you get jobs not of equal pay necessarily, but equal dignity.
To be sure.
Dignity is a very important part of the work.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and I
But-
would like to ask a general question, are we in a consensus here that AI automatically means a diminution in the size of the job market? Because heretofore, all kinds of mechanization have increased jobs, not decreased
And
them.
they increase them because you create a lot of wealth and people go out and do other things. I mean, that's been
Yeah.
the nature of this thing. What I'm concerned about isn't a dramatic reduction in jobs. There'll be plenty of jobs out there because this wealth will create new jobs. It's whether or not we have a system of education and training which creates opportunities for these folks who are truck drivers or whatever. Look, we were putting 15,000 single women on welfare to work when I was governor every year. And people said it was hopeless. I mean, they were the underclass, this, that, and the other thing. These were welfare mothers. 75% of them never saw welfare again. What were they doing? All kinds of stuff. Some of them are now, they call me up and tell me they're running businesses.
Is that because of policies you introduced? Is that because of policies that you introduced?
Well, I'd like to think it was. What's happened to the famous Massachusetts ET program? It's disappeared. Don't ask me why. We're not doing it. We still have 55,000 families on public assistance, and we have the worst labor participation rate, training rate for those folks of any state in the country. 7% of our welfare recipients are in job training.
Wow.
It's crazy. This is
Why
absolutely crazy.
don't we launch a program to do this?
Well,
Yeah, I mean, to that end, I mean, for who benefits, I think in digging into, like, what is an ethical framework for each specific AI project, you know, you could look at what is the mission of the project, what is the transparency of it, does it deserve to be open source, or is it something that should be possibly, you know, in a autonomous weapon sense, you know, obviously open source blueprints for that leaking are probably not a good idea, but in more general purpose utilities, open source is extremely crucial. Also security, and then, yeah, I mean, if they're generating all this wealth, is there some sort of cooperative structure for sharing the fruits of that technology?
Let me give you one other example. Wyoming, it turns out, mines more coal than any other state in the country. It's not West Virginia. And miners are getting laid off. Why? Because coal is gone, effectively. They're being hired as wind technicians, because Wyoming happens to have a lot of wind. And the only qualification, they're better jobs, you're not in a mine, and the only qualification is that you're not afraid of heights. So miners are now becoming wind technicians. Why? Because there's a whole new opportunity out there to get into the clean energy industry. The question, I mean, the thing that I'm concerned about is this country, and for that matter the world, but this country in particular, equipping itself to take advantage of this? I think the answer to that question is not very well, which is one of the reasons why you got all these unhappy people in one industry town. So we went through that situation in Massachusetts. I mean, Haverhill was a shoe town, Lowell was a textile town, New Bedford was a textile town. What's happened? Well, I'd like to think, if it wasn't anybody's particular, well, I'd like to think we kind of organized ourselves. Obviously, we have this great resource in higher education, David, which has a great deal to do with our relative success. Our only problem now is that it's mostly concentrated in the eastern third of the state, and the folks out there in western Massachusetts aren't getting the advantages. There are ways to do it, like, for example, hooking them up with a train so they can get on trains and go to Boston. I mean, this is not rocket science, folks, but it does require, I think, around the public sector, a serious focus on creating the systems that will produce the folks that can fill these new jobs. And I think that's where we're not doing well, and don't be surprised if you don't have that. You got a lot of unhappy people who are not getting the opportunity to take advantage of these jobs because they don't have the skills to do it.
You know, there's a program called Teach for America.
Yeah.
And a lot of college grads will
Mhm.
enter that and will try their hand at teaching in the public school systems around the
Right,
country.
right.
How about starting another program that could be Science for America or Engineering for America that brings some of the STEM graduates out and gives them opportunities to work with people in their communities? I mean, already, I know at my institution, there are a lot of students who are out in the Providence community, in the schools, they're helping out with teaching and so
Yeah.
forth. So if you maybe just leverage something that's in place.
And it's more than that, John. I mean, when I was governor, we did this Massachusetts Biotech Council was just being created, and came to us and they said, we need biotech production workers. Now, frankly, I had no idea what a biotech production worker. Who are they? These folks that walk around in those suits, kind of, it's not an assembly line, as all of you know, who've been in a biotech company, and they're doing all kinds of stuff. Took 1 year post-high school training. We put in half the money, they put in half the money. We started training 500 of these folks a year. They did get tuition credits to the local community college once they got the job, but if they wanted to go on, they could. And hundreds and hundreds of young folks who got excellent jobs right out of high school. We've got a network of regional vocational technical high schools in the state, fortunately. 24 of which are terrific, and Madison Park in Boston is terrible. But that's Boston's fault. But these kids, we've got a waiting line of students trying to get into these folk tech high schools, and almost every one of them is going to work. They've got many co-op programs and this kind of stuff. So I'm not pessimistic about either our ability to create new jobs with this new wealth, or our ability to get excellent jobs for people at every level. The question is, do we have the will and the capacity to do so? And I think that's where we're lacking. I mean, I think it's criminal that we've got 55,000 single mothers raising kids on welfare. There's no reason for that, and that's our fault.
I do think that this will require, I mean, given the amount of money, that you'll need to rethink, and the opposite rethink that we see on taxation. Again, I mean, we see this right now, it's a big issue in Europe, and companies like Facebook, they're making huge amounts of money off advertising in the large countries. They're located in Ireland, and they pay almost no tax, but the money is being generated elsewhere. Now, I mean, if you see this situation repeating in all kinds of, by all kinds of companies, I mean, you can see robotics companies making huge profits, but, I mean, there has to be some kind of compensatory mechanism. You can't just say, okay, we'll leave it to the diminishing tax base to pay for the education of people who are displaced by this technology. I mean, must be some kind of connection between the two. Right now, we see the opposite direction. I'm not very optimistic about the ethical performance of some of these companies, that, especially the ones that are purportedly liberal and sort of, progressive around Silicon Valley. If you actually look, and I mentioned this in my talk, yeah, I mean, when Facebook, explicitly refuses to follow Federal Election Commission rules on advertising, it used to make lots of money, and resulted in the kind of ads that were shown in the U.S. election. I've never seen any, I mean, because I'm not American and wasn't here, but I mean, they explicitly ignored that. And so, I mean, so clearly the profit maximization is so great that, you're not going to sort of, I mean, all this happy talk about, oh, we're bringing people together and encouraging dialogue, we know that's nonsense. So I'm worried about, who's going to pay for these.
Yeah.
I mean, will the companies that are responsible for the shedding of jobs in certain areas, will they in some way participate in the creation of new jobs?
This comes back to the issue of politics again, because now we're in an era where the incentives are perverse and for pro-greed, and where the regulations are being slashed by the day. So how do you, as a politician knowledgeable about tech and the benefits, think that we can turn around the rudder of state, regardless of party, but in terms of just the degree of ignorance versus knowledge about how one can, in a pro-social manner, affect policies and technological development?
Well, I'm pessimistic. If you read Tom Nichols' The Death of Expertise, which just chronicles page after page how we're going in the wrong direction on listening to expertise, then I'm kind of concerned.
So how can we reverse that? I guess,
Yeah.
again, I think it falls on us because we're the so-called experts.
Well, a
And-
classical way of responding to this crisis is to have someone who has two aspects. First, they have to understand the problem well, have to have a reasonable solution to that, and then they have to frame a story that is understood well
Mhm.
by the people of whom you want influence.
Yeah.
So, do we have everything that we need here around the table? Maybe we can put it all together in a story. But I think, to the extent that AI is hot today, when you were talking about the ethical dimensions, the thought that occurred to me was, if the AI community were to promote the ethical understanding of AI and say that and then address the problem of unemployment as it might relate to the subject, and then based on that, argue for a retraining story, a re-education story. That's where all the academics, whether they be at the university level or lower, can play a role. And, right?
But the first part of that has already happened, but of course the politicians aren't listening to it at all. I'm very curious what you think is going to happen with taxation in the European Union. Do you feel there is real momentum to fix these issues you mentioned? Like, could Germany have a law saying that if you advertise in Germany, you pay taxes on that revenue in Germany, or clamp down on Ireland?
This is being argued here as we speak, basically. There is broad recognition on the part, especially of countries like Germany, France, and large countries that provide the bulk of revenue for social media and see no benefits from it. This is not yet at the problem of jobs being displaced. It's simply revenue that they're not getting for activity on their, by people on their territory. That's still a low-level problem compared to robotization, in which companies produce unemployment, but they're not really paying for this. In fact, companies that reduce employment through robot or automation, in fact, are paying less taxes because they're not paying social taxes. The social tax, the kind of rate is around 30 to 35% for most countries in Europe. Health, depending on how the healthcare system is and so forth, but welfare and all those things. You're ending up with companies saving money by automatizing and creating problems for society that are with less money for the solution of those problems. Retraining, whatever, welfare, whatever it is. And I've not seen that really addressed by any politicians yet, because it's still, you're thinking about the next election cycle. You're not thinking about where will we be in 5 years, which in Europe is always after your next election cycle.
Yeah, what you're describing explains perfectly data that Eric Brynjolfsson at the Sloan School I mentioned is seeing, where if you look at of all the income that a company has, how many % of that go out to the labor in salaries, to the workers, and how many % go to the shareholders, to the capital? That has been a percentage which has been remarkably stable for like 50 years, but in recent years, the labor fraction of that gets smaller and smaller. and the fraction that goes to capital larger and larger because of technology. Because of course, if you can build it with machines, it's not going to be salaries anymore. It's going to be those who own the machines who get the money. And I mean, the obvious solution to that is just to dial up the taxation a little bit so that you still get the same amount of revenue, so you can take care of everybody. The recent tax plan in the U.S., which I know you love dearly, is going exactly in the opposite direction. And
And by the way, it's a product of fake news, because the corporate tax rate in America, in fact, is not the highest in the country. It's not 35%, it's 18. And we're kind of in the middle of the pack, and we're listening to this crap about how we're paying the highest corporate taxes in the world. Look, I think this has been a great discussion. I hope, Twan tells me we've got to kind of bring this to a close. I hope we can take off from this within our circle here, and really, with the help of all of you, go at this. Because part of it's just massive misinformation. Part of it is ignoring the lessons of history. You know, we've been going through this process for a long time, and our demise has always been predicted. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be taking it seriously, because there are solutions here, folks. A lot of them are political.
mhm.
And it's us politicians and you guys that know this stuff that have got to spend a lot of time together. But I sense among politicians a much greater willingness to bring experts into the process, not the other way around. And it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. But thank you very much. Thank you particularly. And we look forward to
And this is
Thank you for-
exciting. The first discussion we name every month we do, that is the AI World Society roundtable. And this is the first session we do. Thank you so much for your contribution for AI World Society today. And we hope we continue stay in touch and discuss more and prepare some report and initiative to announce April 25 for G7 summit. This year we do with Canada government for G7 summit. So we will contribute initiative about AI, AI World Society in April 25. So thank you so much for the first great session. Thank you so much for
Thank you
President
too for
Victoria.
attending.
Thank you.
Our leaders. Thank you so much for your great
There's the leader,
contribution
we're
today.
just following. So